myself out.
I am afraid of...
I'm terrified and paralyzed by...
I am deathly afraid of...
Welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast with your host, me, Ryan Perrio. Hello and welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Perrio. Today, we celebrate episode 50. It's awesome. We got a great guest for you today. My guest is Mela Borawski, host of the Bell, Book, and Candles podcast, and she is a Southern witch. But Mela has a condition called face blindness, where she cannot recognize people by their face. Like her body doesn't, or her eyes don't register, I guess, how people appearance. And so her whole life, she's kind of gone through this, and we kind of get into the fact of how when you have a condition that's very obscure and not really what I would call a mainstream, kind of condition, how hard it can be on you to go through daily life. Mela is an amazing human being. She's super sweet. She's a mother of two. We talk about her witchcraft, her podcast, her family, and then we get into her dealing with face blindness and her fear of socializing. So let's get into the episode with Mela Borawski. All right, we're here with Southern witch and host of the Bell, Book, and Candle podcast, Mela Borawski. Mela, how are you doing today? Did I get the name right?
You did. Thank you. I'm doing well.
So you run a Bell, Book, and Candle podcast where you talk about paganism and witchcraft, and it's not all bubble, toilet trouble. It's actually I would almost call you the Martha Stewart of witches. Like it's very calming. It's very, very accepting of whatever's going on. It doesn't seem like there's any, it just seems like it's a fun conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I look at witchcraft, paganism as just a means for a spiritual path. So for me, I just happen to be very nature-based. I'm a pagan minister, so I teach classes. I do this as a means really of almost like a ministry. And because of also being a hypnosis practitioner and having my own business with wellness, I bring that into my spirituality. So that's why my podcast is kind of like a witchy wellness type thing.
It's very original and fun. And do you ever hypnotize your husband? Do you just take out the garbage? Take out.
I wish it were like that.
You're getting very helpful.
I would more want to do that to my children, I think, than my husband.
So when did you, I guess, first discover paganism as far as for you, like, oh, this is something I could really get into?
Probably, I'm 49, so I'd say in my early 30s or so. So I grew up in a very strict, where I live in South Carolina, so Bible Belt, evangelistic, fundamentalist type church. And I was a missionary overseas. I went to Bible college, all that sort of thing. But it just, I don't know, something was missing. And oddly enough, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And then I got introduced to, hey, let me play a druid. And as I'm kind of a nerd, so as I'm doing this research for my character, I start running into, hey, there's real stuff out there. This really fits with a lot of the things that I've been thinking my whole life that I've been told was wrong and bad. And so it kind of went from there. So I would say early 30s.
How has your family adjusted to that?
Well, my husband and I almost got divorced. His church was telling him that I was demon possessed and things like that. But we worked it out. We had a legal separation, but we worked it out. And now he's extremely supportive as far as my parents. They got out of what they were in as well. And my mom is one of my biggest supporters. My dad doesn't believe really at all what I believe. My mom's a little on the edge, but he still supports me. In fact, with my podcast, there's a little song we sing at the beginning, and my dad wrote the lyrics to that and sings it with me.
That's awesome. I was wondering who,
Yeah.
because it's a little, almost like country-esque,
Yeah.
like almost like Back in the Saddle kind of, like,
Yeah.
but which, and I was like, oh, I was assuming that was your husband that was singing it with you.
Yeah, that's my dad. And it's really amazing with the story of everything that I came out of, and just a lot of abuse and a bad situation, bad family situation, that we're so close. We live right next to each other on farmland now. And that my dad would write that in support of me and then sang it with me is really meaningful to me. I don't think everybody necessarily, like you say, would know what that is. But for me, it's very meaningful to have that on there.
Yeah, it's an awesome memory, and it's something you can cherish forever because it's something that's preserved. It's a memory that's kind of a preserved memory.
Yeah.
So I love how I feel like you're the total epitome of love wins. Like the epitome of no matter what happens, as long as there's love there, there's a way to make it work. Like both with your parents as well as your husband, it seems like there's enough love here that we can make this work and be supportive and still find happiness.
Yeah, it took a lot of work, but yeah, self-love was the key. When I learned to love myself and I went to counseling and just had a lot of work to truly love every part of myself, that changed every relationship in my life.
I feel like that's a lot of things. Like for me, that's kind of how comedy works too. Is you kind of expose those flaws in a public forum, and you expose them in a way that gets you the reaction you're looking for. So for me as a comic, I'm looking for the whole room to laugh. Whereas, you're looking for, some like more of a, I guess, we're both looking for relatability, but I'm looking for it in the form of laughter. You're looking for it in the form of communion almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
And so like, I'm curious about the book part, because I know the bell is being in South Carolina and the candles are for the pagan and the witchcraft. Where does the books fall in? Is that just...
So there's a movie about witchcraft, I think maybe by Disney or something, and it's called Bell, Book, and Candle, but it's just a bell that you ring. So I changed it to be Southern Belle. The book part of it is your book of shadows, so your spell book. So that's the bell book, and then the candle fire. We witches always have candles going.
Yeah, I was curious, like the spell book. Do you actually have one?
I do, yeah.
That's awesome. That's just I can't imagine what like that ceremony would be like, since you're a minister and stuff. Do y'all still gather, or do y'all do it over Zoom?
Right now we're doing it on Zoom and Facebook Live. So I do a full moon ceremony every single month. I have every month for a little over 2 years now. And it started out in person, but when the pandemic hit, we went to Zoom, and it's good. It's really good. Of course, I love being able to have a fire and being around the fire and have the people gather. But it's been good because people who couldn't normally come to the one I would do here in the community have been joining us, even from all over the world.
And that's what I feel like what this pandemic has done is it's made you a larger community by being able to do it not just in person, but then to also now think maybe I should also live stream this to even, find more of my, I guess, family and fellowship by having a virtual, I guess, meeting. So what is the full moon ceremony? I have to know now what that is. So you have to...
So the full moon is just basically honoring that energy of release. So the correspondence that we feel with a moon is letting go. I don't always do a traditional release ceremony. I do various things. So around a Thanksgiving type autumn, I might do a Thanksgiving, and I might do a cord cutting where you're cutting energetic cords to people. My full moon ceremonies are very interfaith. I have people from all religions and spiritualities that come. So I make sure my language is very inclusive. When I do new moon things, it's very pagan, and I do that on the podcast page. But for the full moons, it's just basically getting together, honoring the energy of the moon, and doing some sort of ritual of some sort that is healing in some way.
That sounds so awesome. Like it just just kind of a gathering, just to almost like it's a meet and greet on the full moon.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of blown away. Like, this is really cool. Like,
we're not all crazy. We're not all weird.
I'm one of these people that I don't really belong to any kind of religion, but I appreciate all of them because it's still something that's needed. It's just because some people, choose to believe or not believe. I was like, but it still is a help. It can sometimes be a foundation to shoulder some of the burdens that you may have going on in your life. And so I'm always appreciative, always fascinated to kind of learn the little like minutia of each religion, like how they're a little different and things like that.
Someone once told me that everybody is getting to the top of the mountain. They're taking different paths. They're taking different ways. Maybe someone is jumping out of a helicopter to get to the top. The only people that aren't actually making it to the top of the mountain are the ones running around the bottom, telling everyone else that they're on the wrong path.
Indeed. My friend had a bit about religion. He's like, they're all pretty much 99% the same. Like, we're all like, there's a afterlife, there's a better place. Be a good person while you're alive. And we're taking donations.
Yeah.
So, since your husband isn't like a practitioner of witchcraft, like how does he like show support? Like, does he like point stuff out that could be possibility, like healing stones or something like that? Like, he'll go with you and.
He's extremely supportive now, and he will buy me things for my altar. I have a skull over this way on my altar that he got engraved special for me and gave it to me. And that was a huge, huge step, because when we first got back together after our first separation, we had two. He said, you can't bring tarot cards in the house. You can't bring this. You can't bring that. That's satanic. And pretty much he's not becoming pagan, but he's just starting to have his own thoughts about things. So he's more supportive. And he he goes with me to places. He helps me with my podcasts and YouTube and all that. And he's extremely supportive. It's just really amazing.
Yeah, it's got to be fun. And, it's just learning. It's also learning and realizing that even though it can be scary initially, learning something new, like either one going on stage or public speaking, like for that first time, taking that first step on stage, it's terrifying, but it's okay. It's there.
Yeah.
So my podcast is about fears. So that's a great segue. And you had a very interesting fear. Go ahead and tell me what your fear is and explain a little bit about it, if you would.
Okay, so I have something called prosopagnosia, and that is face blindness. And I lived in fear, and I still kind of have it, but I've kind of gotten over it a little bit. But my fear was recognizing people, because I don't have the ability to recognize people's faces, this part of the face here. Mm-hmm. So I've been tested, I've been in research studies, and I had a really rough 20s, teenage years, because I would even isolate myself because I was so afraid of not being able to recognize people that I should know, that I wouldn't go out. I didn't want to go to the grocery store because I might run into somebody and I would look stupid, because it might be someone that I knew for 15 years and I would have no idea. And it happened many times. They would come talk to me, and I was so inauthentic because I would pretend that I knew who they were. Yes. Yeah. Hey, honey, hey, boo boo, that kind of thing, and never using their name. But as I got more depressed and as I just really hated life because of a lot of things that were going on in my life, I just thought, you know what? I don't want to deal with that. I am too afraid that somebody's going to just put me down and call me out on it. So I isolated myself so much, got rid of friends, got rid of going out, and just stayed home in a depressed state for many, many years.
That would be absolute. it's got to be such a, because it's not just scary in the sense of social, but just the self-reflection, like what's wrong with me, like the emotional, I guess, toll you would take on yourself, because I don't want to be too forward and call it abuse, but just the toll of, how could you not know that's your friend of 10 years? What are you?
Right.
Are you some sort of monster? Like, you just the mean,
right. That I don't care.
yeah, just the mean thoughts. Because I don't know exactly what I have, because I've never been. I guess I'm 44, and I'm at this point. I'm like, well, what is it going to help me now? My cards have been dealt. My hand has been played, and so it's somewhere on the I would say on the spectrum, but I would be really awkward in conversations, and I would feel ostracized, and I would go over it in my mind. I'm like, why are you such a monster? Why are you such a hateful person? And this comedy has helped me kind of accept that part of me, and just just make peace with it, rather than think of it and have it be like your monster in the cage, and that you can't have anybody close to you, because this is going to be, they're going to find this, and they'll hate you, or this is going to make them leave you.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even know what it was for most of my life. I had no idea there was an actual name for it. I just thought that I was broken. Yeah.
It's got to be hard too, because like it's not something other people have like readily. So it's not somewhere you can go for like a support group,
right?
It's not like you got that from your dad, and how they deal with it. So I can't imagine, because then your parents probably just are helpless to kind of feel powerless. I would think, as a parent, to have your kid go through this and not know the cause, or where to go with it, and let alone how. So does any of your children kind of have any like signs of this happening, or?
We haven't noticed it in either one of my children. They're in their early 20s now, and we haven't noticed anything at all, which is good.
Yeah. It's just when they don't want to see that their parents are there. That's when it's very selective for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's with most kids.
So how did you when did you kind of find out what it was? Was it before you met your husband, after your husband?
It was after I met my husband. Of course, I was still struggling with it before I met him, and we knew there was a problem. He was very good about, I just thought I was bad with names. I didn't really recognize that it was faces. I just thought I was bad with names, and I couldn't remember people. So when he was with me, he would come up and say, "Oh, hi, so-and-so," and he would give their names. "Yeah, how's it going at wherever we knew them from?" And he would give me these cues. And so that would help me. But I found out there was a name for it when I first heard about face blindness. And I thought, wait a minute, there's something called face blindness? That sounds like my issue. And that was probably maybe 39, 40 years old. So only about 10 years ago. And then I started looking into it. I started looking into the research studies. I did the tests that they give you to find out that I am extremely below average. I have it really bad. Some people do. It's a spectrum as well. Yeah. So some people have it in other ways. And from there, there's no cure for it, but there are ways to get around it. Like I would recognize how someone walked, or I would recognize their hairstyle. I can't see this part of the face. So I was able to learn how to kind of get around it. And then with that self-love I was talking about, I finally came to terms, and I said, you know what? This is how I am, and I'm not going to be ashamed about it anymore. And I started actually telling people that I had it and saying, please don't take it personally. And it wasn't so bad. But when my children were young, and I was supposed to go and get them from school, and I was terrified to do tasks like that. That seems like an easy task for a mom, right? Go pick up your kids from elementary school. I was so afraid because I couldn't recognize my children. But if they were in the right spot, I could get them. Well, I drove up one day. They were not in that spot. And I drove past my own children, and they were running after my car, trying to catch up with me. I felt so broken. I don't think I'd felt as broken as I did that day when I saw kids chasing my car and had no idea who they were until I heard them saying, "Mom, Mom."
Yeah, I that would definitely would be a struggle, because you at that point you wonder, you blame yourself, and it's never a healthy. It's never a healthy way to approach things, and I totally relate to that. Like I would literally find things to blame myself for, and then again from comedy I've learned it's like okay, so if you think, just kind of look at the symptoms and just kind of read and just do some research. And it's amazing what you can find. And it's something when you find something that matches, that you can put it towards, like you can figure out what it is. It's such a relief. Like I can't explain the relief I found when I started reading about Asperger's and looking at the symptoms and how much it paired with my life. Like I always was, seemed like I had gifted abilities, but would never do the work, would always be borderline passing or totally capable of exceeding his expectations at his job, but still struggles to perform all the tasks properly. Like you'll always have, because it would frustrate me at work because I would be doing so well in one area, but then just one area would drop. And then if I'd focus on that area, then another area would go way down.
Yeah.
And so it was such a struggle. And then you, like you say, once you realize what it is, and you can start to find steps to, okay, like maybe I don't play video games if they overstimulate me and put me in an angry state, or, just, take a deep breath. You don't have to just immediately go back into something when you finish one task. You don't need to jump right into another one if you're frustrated.
Mm-hmm. People don't want to be labeled, but there is something to having a label that allows you to almost take possession of what it is that you have and dive into it and figure out ways around it. So I understand people don't like labels a lot of times, but in a lot of cases, even for illnesses, just having that label almost gives a freedom. Wouldn't you say it's like a freedom?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a freedom. It's just it's basically not a freedom. It's just, okay, this is why this is happening, rather than trying to figure out all the things that are wrong with you to make it happen. Oh,
yeah.
So this is a thing that people have, and, I also suffer from it. So, and you can preface it, you can label it, you can tell people so that they're not just thinking that because it's a lot harder when you don't know what it is. How would you explain that face blindness if you didn't know what it was? Oh, sorry, I don't know faces very well. I don't, for some reason I can't remember a face at all. So don't take it personally. I don't know why it happens, but it happens. Seems it just seems almost like an excuse to not be social, versus I have a condition called face blindness, and what it does is, for some reason, my mind doesn't retain information about a person's physical features. Mm-hmm. And it just seems it's more, I would say it's the truth, but it's a real thing that they can look up, instead of just an opinion of, oh, this person's just, at least in my head, that's how I rationalize it.
I mean, people thought that I was really stuck up, and I think part of that was the face blindness. I was so afraid to approach people a lot. I kept to myself, super quiet, even in high school, even in middle school. And I had people tell me later on, yeah, we thought you were just stuck up, that you were too good for us. And here it was that I was so afraid of being made fun of. I was so afraid of these people just not accepting me in my broken state or making a fool of myself. And come to find out, these people did think that I just was choosing not to be around them. I was choosing not to remember their name, choosing not to know who they were in the grocery store, you know?
Well, I have done that before. Like I've seen somebody, I'm like, no, we're gonna go down another aisle.
I've done that too on purpose.
So how did you, when your husband, did you meet him? How many times did you like meet him before he kind of stuck?
Well, it was very helpful that we worked at the same place, so I saw him every single day. But he has a very long beard right now, and there was a picture of him that came up on Facebook with no beard. I mean, like a beard like this, down here. And I looked at the picture and it said his name on it, but I did not recognize who that guy was. And I sent it to him, and I'm afraid that if he were to take his beard off now, that it would be very, very awkward. But when I first met him, he was just out of college. We were mid-20s, and because we've been married 25 years this year. And I saw him every single day, and he would come harass me in my office, and so it kind of sunk in. But I still do have that where if he changes something drastically on his face, it's that, wait a minute, who is that?
It really is. Who is this man I married? It's really, you're really living it to the fullest degree.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Like, I don't even know you anymore.
Right. Hey, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe, he can shave off his beard sometime and it'd be like, I have someone new.
Just don't tell my husband. He'll be home any minute. So does your dad help you with the podcast other than the singing at all? Does he, like, you've ever thought about bringing him on as a co-host or anything in any episodes? Or
the only thing that he has done is the second and third episodes are where I tell my life story. And he actually came on and just did a few little pieces of it, of telling his idea, just about what he thought about my depression. And he goes on and he talks about some of the abuse that he was part of and how he really wishes that he hadn't been like that. It's really incredible. But besides the music and then him being in those two where I tell my life story, he doesn't do a lot. I think they listen, but they don't do a lot.
That had to be, I would say that was probably a very intense couple episodes there, probably.
It was very healing too, for him to be willing to come and said, we have come to terms with things a long time ago. I love him. He takes care of me and my family, and I know he loves me. I didn't used to think he loved me, but now I do. And for him to just come and sit by me and record some of the things that I didn't know he was going to say and be able to put that on there was very healing. It's very healing, and
it deepens your connection because you realize that you kind of get their side of the coin too as well. Like, it's not just upon you. Like, you can all, there's some, I guess contrition as well as just, I guess I'm trying to think of what, put yourself in their shoes, but you kind of get an idea of what all was going on and everything else. And so if there was other forces that you weren't aware of because of your age and, because you didn't, you stayed in your room or you, it's definitely healing is probably the best way to describe it. Because but it's such great things. Cause I mean, so many people, it makes me sad so many times that some people are willing to just kind of sever those ties rather than repair.
Yeah. And I guess sometimes you do have to, if there's no kind of contrition, like you were saying, if there's no way to repair a toxic relationship, sometimes you do have to do that. So I'm very lucky and I recognize that. And I think by him and my mom both being on those episodes, it also tells people that I'm not just going behind their backs and telling a nasty story about things that happened to me. That was really important to me. I asked permission from them before I ever told the story.
And it was great that's how on board they were, that they were willing to be willing participants and not just bystanders or people that they wanted to kind of share in the process.
Yeah, that was really great.
And so, like, did the face blindness ever work with your parents too? Like, was there ever a point where you got lost in a store and you were like looking, like if you wandered off at a grocery store and then you started following the wrong person because you just weren't aware that wasn't your mom?
I don't know, because oddly enough, because of a lot of the trauma that happened in my childhood, I don't remember massive portions of my childhood. I can remember late teens and I can remember little snippets here and there, but my childhood is just gone. I don't know if that's because of what's up with my brain. I don't know if that has to do with it or not, but I don't have those memories of being a child to even know. And I've never asked my mom, so that would be an interesting thing to ask her if that ever happened. I know I was a very strange child. I know that I was very imaginative. I had some psychic gifts that, like I said, even as a child, I was being told that it was, bad and evil and things like that. And, somebody told me something one time that I thought was really cool. It made me feel good. They told me that maybe I was given this, what you might call a curse, or what I was calling broken, but maybe I was given that to make room in my brain to see the spiritual world a little better. That I don't need to see people's actual faces because I'm able to see their auras. I'm able to see ghosts and spirits and things like that. So maybe I don't have to see everybody's face. That was told me pretty recently, and I never thought about that.
And maybe that's kind of something you developed also to compensate for not being able to recognize the phases. So. It's a defense mechanism to realize, okay, if I can't recognize people, maybe I can recognize intent. And so it's almost a defense thing of, okay, I can tell, I can't know your name, but I can tell you're a good person by the energy you give off.
Absolutely. And I can read body language like nobody's business too.
That definitely helped being a mom. You could see every fidget. Can't recognize the face, but I can see the fidgeting.
Yeah. I know if you're lying to me. I know all kinds of stuff. And yeah, they tried to get away with stuff. They tried to get away with, my oldest tried to get away with smoking and thinking that mom wouldn't notice. I knew before they even hit the door. I just knew that's what they were up to.
That's got to be kind of scary for them too, because
yeah. Which mom?
Yeah. But I mean, it's very, it's one of those things too, where even though not because I don't have a traditional belief system, doesn't mean that I don't have values. Mm-hmm. It's like people get those mixed up as like you're still human values and stuff. Like there's still right and wrong, no matter which. Yeah,
still ethics. Yeah.
And so your kids were probably, it's still, even though you may not have the same, church, that group that other kids that they went to school with, there still wasn't things that they could do. Like, there's not like, oh, it's
absolutely
the free range house.
No, it was not.
So do any of your kids do tarot or any of the witchcraft with you at all? Or
my youngest, Hudson, is very sensitive. He's what you might call old soul, but he's not really interested in what I do as much as just, I hear him talk to his friends. He's very empathic. He's very sympathetic. So I see him have spiritual gifts, but he does not necessarily follow my spiritual path in a sense. My oldest, he has helped me with clearing away spirits because I get called to clear ghosts and spirits and negative entities. He's helped me with that a little bit. He comes and looks at my things, and I think he's extremely interested, but he hasn't quite made the jump because even with my husband being Christian, going to church every Sunday, and then my own path, we weren't, you have to choose something. We imparted wisdom to them. We imparted ethics of what they need to do and treat other people. But we didn't make them follow a spiritual path. So now it's more like, maybe I'm a little interested in what mom's doing.
Well, and clearing spirits is cool. Like it's still a cool, cool thing. Like, like is it really haunted? Like there's that allure of mystery because was it just a creaking floorboard or was it something
Right.
more?
Yeah.
And so I always find those fascinating. Have you ever like stayed like in a haunted like hotel or mansion or anything like that, like as a vacation?
Not on purpose.
Okay.
I think that since I do it for a job and since I go in there and have to deal with this kind of crap as a job basis, even though I love ghost tours and I will go on a ghost tour on every town I go to, but I'm not looking for some kind of activity to happen because I've got plenty of it in my life already, if that makes sense.
Well, one of my friends on a previous episode, he's afraid of like the haunted house rides. Like he gets so amped up for the ride. Like he's not scared of the monster stuff, but just the anticipation of going and all his mind starts to race.
Oh.
But he was like, I'll never stay in a real haunted house because I don't like to be alone with my thoughts. He's like, why would I just be in a house that's totally quiet and just also be alone in my thoughts and pay a fee basically
Yeah.
to just sit with my thoughts.
Hmm.
Like I couldn't. I get it. Like sometimes I think about it, but if you're spiritually empath, I don't know if that's something that maybe could be almost a sensory overload, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's a lot of stimulus, so you may not sleep. You may be just irritable, or you just have a lot of input coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that way even just going into certain stores. The energy is in so bad. Bad is the only descriptor I can think of. The energy is just so overwhelming, I guess. The sensory input is, I feel like I can barely get myself out of there. There's one store in particular that's like that every time I go in.
Oof. That would be too, like if you can sense auras, like if you're in a store with a lot of hustle and bustle, that could be a lot of distraction.
Walmart is the store. I can't go in Walmart. That's the store that just is overwhelming for me as soon as I walk in. A hard time in there.
It's not that hard for me except for checking out, because it always seems like for some reason there's not enough cashiers, so you're just it's just daunting to look as you're trying to, like, I'm ready to go, and just seeing a line of 10 to 15 people just waiting.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It just kind of mentally kind of defeats you.
Yes, yeah.
But you also, for someone that does spiritual, I mean, you're at a perfect location, South Carolina, like up to the north is just colonial, all old colonial, and then to the south is voodoo and southern.
Yeah.
With with all the voodoo and everything, other influences from, all the Caribbean cultures, as well as colonial America, that kind of blends together, that, to make like I would say a hotbed of history that's just there that maybe is not written about, but still happen.
Yeah, my family comes from the mountains of Georgia. That's Appalachian folk magic up there. Scotch-Irish roots. And then you've got the low country of South Carolina, which has all the Gullah and Geechee people, and they have their own hoodoo magic. And then, you go down a little more and over, and you've got voodoo, whatever you want to call it. So, the South is full of spirits, and it's full of magic. Now, it is the Bible Belt, so people don't always want to claim that it's magic. Mm-hmm. But if you look, you will find it.
Oh, yeah. And you'll find great cuisine. I definitely would go to like Charleston area at some point, because they have amazing shrimp and grits, and it's just cool. It's just a cool place to vacation. Mm-hmm. Like, I used to have a friend that lived in Myrtle Beach, and he raved about it. Like, it's just the greatest place to live year round.
Yeah, I love Charleston. I've been to more ghost tours there than I can even count, and I've eaten at so many places, and it's just a wonderful place. Savannah's great as well, which is in Georgia.
So what happens on a ghost tour? Like, that seems interesting.
So what happens when I go on one or when I give one? Because I give them too.
Well, what is the essence of a ghost tour? Because I kind of know, but at the same time, there may be more to it than what I'm thinking.
Basically, on the ghost tours that I've been on, there's one specific place in Charleston. Maybe it's at night in the graveyards or around different houses, and you just hear the stories, and you're told the stories, hauntings, legends, spirits, all these things like that. And that's pretty much what all ghost tours that I've ever been on, including the ones I do, is you just hear the stories and the legends of whatever specific place you're in. So for me, I do my ghost story tours downtown at an old mill. It's an old cotton mill, and it's a museum now. And we do them every October. And I tell South Carolina legends and ghost tales. And we have our own ghosts there that I've had experiences with. And it's the same thing. The people will tell their own experiences, and they'll tell the legends. So if you're interested in storytelling, mythology, legends, ghost tours are a great thing to go on.
Definitely will have to look into that, because it just seems like it's a fun, like I would say, just one night. Just to kind of, especially when you're doing it in October, like perfect for to get you ready for Halloween. Why not? And why not buck tradition and do, the haunted house or a hayride and go listen to real stories? Like I did one on a carriage in Beaufort one October, which was amazing. And they took you around to different houses that were haunted in Beaufort, South Carolina. That would be so cool. Because, with the humidity and everything at night, like it just adds to the allure, especially if it could be a full moon. Like, I don't know if you that'd be perfect.
Next
time you have you could have a ghost story, like full moon ceremony where everybody just shares like a legend.
So I did that this last year, even though it was pandemic. Samhain, which is what I celebrate as Halloween. We call it Samhain. It's the witch's new year. I invited people outdoors onto my farm. We had social distancing and everything, but we had a fire. We sat around and we told ghost stories. So I actually did that. And it was a full moon this past Samhain, this past Halloween.
That's awesome. Like perfect timing. Like,
yeah.
Because I was just thinking to myself, like, what a perfect like full moon ceremony to have that, and then just also be doing a ghost tour at the same time.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Like, I wish there was like you could almost do a crawl of some sort, like if they have beverages or something like that, like a beverage sponsor could be at every stop on your ghost tour offering a different spooky beverage.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So you've always grown up in South Carolina. Have you ever or Georgia, South Carolina area? Have you ever lived outside of there, or?
I was born in Florida, and my grandmother and uncle, whom I was very close to, I would go back every year and visit them. And when I was young, I lived there a little bit. But ever since the third grade, so for most of my life, I've lived in South Carolina in some place. One year I lived in Massachusetts. I lived overseas for a little while in Cyprus it was about 4 or 5 months. But besides that, South Carolina, my husband's a Yankee. I told him, I'll marry you, but I'll never move up north. And so he's been here too.
Well, I guess definitely it's worked out since he's still here. So.
Yeah, he didn't want to go up to the snow again anyway. He was from New York.
So I'm glad he acclimated. He likes it, and I'm guessing it's definitely a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
Definitely more social is one thing I've learned. I've grown up in Texas most of my life. So is that up north, a lot of people face down. Like it's a lot of people, because it's so many people, you just can't look everybody in the eye. And so everybody looks down, and there's not the, when you pass someone, how are you, like you would do, like you would almost thrive up there with the face blindness, because you would keep to yourself. And that's exactly what everybody does up north, is they just, everything is internalized. Everything is just, because you're just, everybody's so overpacked. Like you're in a building with hundreds of other people. So you just, everything, thin walls, you have to keep everything. Even when you go home, you can't relax because they can hear you. Your neighbors can hear you. Then they're going to talk about you.
Yeah. It's a different world. When I visited up there, what I noticed is that everyone seemed really angry. So that's a big difference too, because everyone just talked in a different way and everyone seemed really angry. And maybe it was because they don't talk to each other and they don't look at each other in the eyes. But Randy's, my husband's dad, scared the crap out of me because he was so loud and so angry. And I even asked him after I first met him, I said, why is your dad angry all the time? He said, what are you talking about? He's not angry all the time. I was like, what?
Oh, I don't want to see him angry. This is not angry.
Exactly.
Let me know when he's angry and I won't come. I'll stay home.
Yeah.
So that's, gosh, I can't imagine, like, especially with that, like, I mean, that definitely helped with face blindness on that one because you knew him by sound. Like, you could tell.
Yeah. I didn't see him all that often either because they lived in Utica, New York. So I didn't see him all that often. With face blindness, the odd thing is I can recognize somebody not because of their face, but because they're in a certain spot. So for instance, when I work at the museum, which I got laid off for the pandemic, sadly, but when I worked at the museum, there was someone who sits at the front desk and they're always at the front desk. And I come in and I see the person's shape and I say, oh, okay, that's so-and-so. Hi. And I can say their name and everything. But if that same person that I've talked to for 6 years every day, I see them in a grocery store, they're not in the right space. They're not in the right environment. And I will have no clue who they are, where I know them from, or their name. So that's weird how that works. Like if they're in the right environment, I will know who they are just like that.
Yeah, like you were saying with your kids, like they had to be in a certain spot to pick them up, and if they wandered off or anything like that, because again, that would be terrifying too. If your kids wandered off and you had to look for them in the store.
And I've had to, yeah, and it was scary.
Because it's like you almost question if it's them or not, and
I did, and I would just call them by name and try not to look stupid. But I was very protective over them staying with me, having their hands. They would want to go look at stuff, and I would lose track of them, very seriously lose track of them, as in not be able to find my own children if they got lost from me.
Yeah, I'm glad you've kind of found an alternative. So what are kind of, what would you look for if you have face blindness, like besides the symptoms of, I don't seem to be recognizing faces, but is there other, I would say, like symptoms that people could maybe look to besides just not being able to see them like face wise to be able to recognize people outside of a certain environment?
The way that they test for it relies on two things, and the one is just an hour's worth of trying to pick out people's faces, and including actors, actresses, that sort of thing. When I watch TV, if there's a lot of characters on a movie or a TV, I can't follow because I don't know who's doing what, and so I have to ask my husband, "Who is this now? Where did they come from?" And he'll say, "That's the person who was doing this in the last episode." I'll say, oh, okay. So absolutely not recognizing even actors' faces, actresses' faces to some degree is going to be a huge part of it. So if you have problems figuring out what actor, what actress, or sometimes even for animals, they can't recognize their own animals apart. I'm pretty good at that. And the other thing is, are you using other means to recognize people? So you have to kind of look at yourself and say, do I know who that person is because of the way they talk, because of how they walk, because of a tattoo, or do I know who that person is because I'm actually recognizing their face? So those are the two main things. There's not a whole lot of other symptoms or anything like that. It's based on, are you recognizing the face at all? And are you using other means to figure out who a person is?
That's interesting. I never even thought about like watching movies. Like I'm just thinking daily life. I'm like, yeah, you couldn't. There's a lot of movies that, because of just the pacing, even would make it.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine like just like you're just watching it and pretending to kind of follow along because you're just overloaded.
Yeah, I can't tell, especially if it's age shifting. They go back and forth from being kids to I don't know which one is which kid. I can't tell enough unless they say people's names. I just can't tell who people are.
I wonder if subtitles would help with that. Like if you put your subtitles on.
I've used that quite a bit. I like shows that it's kind of the same people every time. Like right now, I'm watching Star Trek Next Generation, and it's pretty much the same people every time. I don't know who the guests are, who the aliens they go to, but I know who Captain Picard is. He's in the same uniform every time, you know?
Yeah. My friend is watching Outlander, so...
I like that one too.
Yeah, because it's like, she said it's just such a fascinating, because she likes the period piece, and it kind of follows the... Sense and Sensibility, like it's the whole period piece, and like it's kind of forbidden, and and it's just it's the old world romance of, you know, this guy's a rebel, he's alpha male, and this woman's ability to affect him, I guess, and change his way of thinking, and it's cool. I get the allure and stuff like that. But it was just funny. She's like, yeah, I'm going to be watching Outlander season 4, and you won't be able to contact me. So nice. I'll see you in a month. And
yeah, that's very addictive.
I guess with binging shows, that does make it easier too, because it's again, when you don't recognize faces, and then you have like the old school TV, like a week. Or, you know, if a season breaks, you have like months, and then you have to all of a sudden jump back in, and who is this guy again? And
it was very hard. I didn't really get into a lot of things. I didn't watch a whole lot of television, to be honest. And that's the first time anyone's really asked me about that. But no, I really didn't watch a lot of television because of that. I watch movies. So I love Netflix and those type of programs now, because I can binge it and watch it one after the other.
Yeah, because I mean, at some point, again, it comes back to that fear of people judging or just putting you down because you don't know who this person is in this movie. Like, like that would be horrible for State. Probably, it's like they take you to a movie, not only that you don't remember them for a second date, and then.
Yeah, not only do I not know who they are, but there's this famous person on the big screen, and I have no clue who it is.
So how do you kind of, I guess, go, like you say, you look for other ways, like certain spots, hairstyles, you kind of peripheral look. Is there any other ways of, like, is it a voice? Can you do like sound kind of recognition? Like if it's a way, a certain way, at certain talks, like, oh, that's Steve, you know, I recognize him by voice.
Absolutely. People's voices, their accents, there's one lady at the museum who walks a little bit different because she has a problem with her knee, and I know who she is right away just by how they walk. If they wear a certain type of clothing, like if they wear a hat all the time, even if it's not the same hat, if they always wear a hat, just things like that. So yeah, tattoos, hairstyles, color of the hair. When they change the hair, though, if they change the hairstyle, get their hair cut, it's over. If that's how I know who they are, it's over. I don't know who it is.
Another thing I learned also with comedy is just pacing. That in your head, this feels like an eternity, but we haven't even been silent for a second. And so a lot of times you'll stress yourself trying to think of the name like so fast.
Yeah.
I would say just also pacing and just, okay, give it a minute to think. Just, you know, say, hey, I'm sorry, just have something on my mind. Or, you know, you just give them a little bit of a, you know, give me a moment. Sorry. Someone just said something to me and I just realized. And then you can buy yourself a couple extra seconds to kind of run through your alternative processes to see who this is.
Yeah. I'm very lucky because my husband knows everybody. He recognizes everybody. When I was younger, I taught a lot of teenagers and children. I was a children's minister at a church, so I had children in those classes. So I run into children, well, they're adults now, but I knew them as children. Well, I wouldn't recognize them from a week ago, let alone 20 years ago. But even if my husband met them just a little while, he can tell me, oh, that's, Jim that you taught back when you were a teenager. And because he'll have seen a picture or met him at some point. And I just think that is a superpower. To me, that is a superpower, to be able to recognize someone from when they were a child to be an adult now.
Yeah.
So my husband's great at that.
Yeah. It's also the perfect compliment, the perfect foil to you, because he's almost like your guy. Like he's your prompter with everything. And even teaching, like, that's amazing that you were able to do that, because that also had to be stress. Because I couldn't imagine the stress of if those kids decided to change seats.
Yeah, I would usually give name tags. It just made it easy for me. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew that even if I taught seminars with adults, I knew that if I put name tags on people, that's what I do now as well. I love Zoom because it has the name right there. I love when people have name tags on, even though my eyes are looking at the name tag, which I sometimes would get really nervous about because it would be someone that I'm supposed to know and I'm looking at their name tag at work. But that's how I knew it. Now, since I tell people right up front, hey, I have this problem. And when I'm teaching, and I teach the volunteers at the museum, and I'll tell them first class, I will not remember you. And they have been so sweet to me. And I have for years, I have people who will come up, and every time they see me, they'll say, hey, I'm Fran. And Fran here, she's always done that for me. And she did it for years until I was able to recognize her. But every time she saw me, she would just come up and say, Fran here. And I knew. And that's so helpful. So if you know somebody with face blindness, telling them your name is very helpful.
Yeah, it's a load off. It realizes that it's to turn the defenses off. Stop panicking. I'm not, because it's a friendly. It's not a. It's Judith,
right?
Because it is, and like I said, it's just a human condition. Sometimes people just have expectations, and when they're not met, they have nowhere to put it, and it's hard. My grandmother had I guess Alzheimer-ish things where she had poor memory, or she would repeat things. And at one point, my mom was like, she would correct every time, Mom, that's not what happened. And I'm like, what does it matter? I mean, if she, there was another podcast, This American Life, where there was a couple had taken improv classes because her mother had Alzheimer's and was living with them. And they were like, instead of, correcting her, or we just went improv. And if you ever heard, improv comedy is always yes and. So if anything's introduced, like, I'm a witch, yes and, we're witches, yes and we are. And then they would introduce the next part of the scene. So they would just take that exercise with her. So anytime she's like, there's a bird out there, instead of saying, there's no bird out there, Mother. Like, oh yeah, what color is he? It's a bluebird, right? Like, or they would just do that, and it was such a eye-opening thing for me. And I, told my mom about it. I'm like, that's something maybe we should introduce, as we get older, instead of trying to bring them back to where they were.
Yeah.
Accept where they are. And
oh yeah. Because
it's hard, and I understand it's hard, because you don't want that passing of time. You want to hold on to your loved ones forever, but
yeah,
in some situations you can't. And to me, that was a way better way of handling it, and just enjoying it and accepting it, rather than trying to correct them and then them feeling bad because they apparently don't remember. Because how would you feel if you say something like, you just said that 5 minutes ago? Don't you remember?
Yeah.
And then you start thinking, did I remember? And
what's wrong with me? Yeah. That's so honoring to the person too, is to allow them to be who they are in that moment.
Yes. And I thank you for doing this, Pam. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Where can people find you on social media as well as your podcast?
So my podcast is Bell Book and Candle, and it's a bell with an E at the end. And I'm on Facebook at Bell Book Candle SC. And you can also find me under 3raysoflight.org, which that's a number 3. That's my business page.
Awesome. Again, I thank you for doing this. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Me too.
So that was Mela. Man, I really felt that interview because it was an obscure condition and I struggled with my own things for so long before I was able to find them. And, you know, thanks to the comic that kind of put me on that path, kind of inadvertently or, you know, just in passing, and I had no idea. But it's such a relief when you do find out what's wrong with you or what's affecting you, and you can learn to take out the factors that bring it forward, and just it's such a welcome feeling, and I can't express how difficult it is when you're in the weeds and you don't know what's happening. It's just defeating, and you just want to throw up your hands and just sit. And it's such a relief when you do find that out. So you know, so many times we just pass things off as laziness or stuck-upness or some other overlying thing to make us feel better, rather than really trying to learn. So keep that in mind. Sometimes, you know, there are conditions. There's so many different health and, you know, mental conditions that exist out there. And so they exist for a reason, that they're there. Don't, you know, it's not a reason to judge. Check out her podcast, Bell Book and Candles. It's very therapeutic. It's very relaxing. It's very warm. And if you're in South Carolina, check out one of her like witch tours or ghost stories, or, you know, full moon ceremonies. It's just to experience something different. Doesn't make it evil. It's just not the norm. And sometimes you need to have those experiences just to have a new perspective on life. I thank you guys for listening. This has been episode 50. If you like the podcast, leave a review. I would love to get some more 5-star reviews if they're out there. If you have suggestions for the show or you want to be a guest, shoot me an email at somefearfans@gmail.com. I'll probably start interviewing some comics here in the next month. Speaking of next month, I will be headlining the Comedy Arena in McKinney. Check that out. I believe tickets have just gone on sale. I will post that in the show notes if they are available. Also, you know, this week I did some comedy in Addison and as well as the Back Door, since I was not on the road. Next week I'll be on the road in Wichita, Kansas, and we'll have another episode while I'm out there. I may record an episode or two with James Johannan, whoever my opener is, just to kind of put a couple podcast episodes down. Check out, you know, comedyarena.com if you're in the North Dallas, McKinney area. I will be headlining episode guest 14. Mallory Davis will be the host, and I believe, let's see here, feature will be episode 32 guest Stephen Gamble. And so it'll be a great time. We'll have a lot going on. Just check out the show. Thanks again for listening. Next week, we'll have another guest with another fear. Thanks for listening to the Sum of All Fears podcast. And now some thank yous for the folks that make this show possible. Thanks to Barry Whitewater for my art and graphics. You can follow him on Instagram at bwhiteh2o. Get it? H2O like water. You can also follow him on Facebook, Music. A huge thank you to Gunnar Olsen for the wonderful music provided for this podcast. You can follow him on Instagram at Gunbuns, that's Gunbuns. as well as his website, GunnarOlson.net. Check out some of the samples that he has recorded. They're amazing. He's an amazing percussionist. If you want to follow the show, we've got a Facebook group, Some of All Fears. Instagram, Twitter, you can find us at Some Fear Fans. If you have some feedback for the show, email me at somefearfans, SOMEFEARFANS @gmail.com. I'll be happy to take those into consideration. Also, if you'd like to be a guest, email me at somefearfans @gmail.com. We can try to iron out some details and get that settled in. Give us some feedback if on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a review. It makes the show bigger, and it's not going anywhere. I'm going to record as many shows as I possibly can. If you want to follow me on social media, I am at Ryan Perio. It's RyanPerrio on all social media platforms. You can follow me there, and you can check me out at ryanperio.com, my website. I'll try to list upcoming shows there as well. It's been kind of spotty because as soon as I set it up, that's when the pandemic happened. And everything's kind of just in a holding pattern. Thanks again for listening to the Sum of All Fears podcast. Next week, we'll have another guest with another fear. Thanks for listening.